They say heroes wear uniforms, but sometimes they walk on four legs and carry scars no one can see. A scream shattered the quiet afternoon on Magnolia Street. 10-year-old Sophie Caldwell froze, her pink backpack clenched between the jaws of a massive German shepherd. The dog's amber eyes weren't playful. They were sharp, focused, scanning the dense hedge across the street like it held something dangerous. "Get away!" Sophie cried, her voice cracking with panic. But the dog didn't flee. It dropped the backpack, circled her once, then picked it up again, backing off just enough to pull her forward. When Sophie stumbled and fell, tears streaming down her cheeks, she didn't notice the rustle in the bushes or the glint of metal in a man's hand. She didn't see the dog step between her and whatever was hiding in those shadows, but Officer Ray Holland did. His patrol car rounded the corner just as the dog let out a sharp, guttural bark, not at Sophie, but at something else entirely. People still talk about that spring afternoon, about how sometimes salvation doesn't show up in a badge or a uniform, but in sharp teeth and a steady gaze. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the name of the city you're watching from. Now let's continue the story. Millfield, Georgia, had seen better days. Once bustling when the textile mill employed half the town, it now wore its hardships like the peeling paint on Main Street's shuttered storefronts. Still, a quiet dignity clung to its oak-lined roads, and to the steady wave of Eleanor Briggs as she placed bowls of food out each evening for the town's strays from the porch of her weathered white house. Among those strays was Shadow, a German shepherd whose powerful stance and soldier's posture hinted at a life lived in service. The townsfolk whispered about him, how he'd appeared 3 years earlier, scarred, silent, and mistrusting of human hands. Only Eleanor had managed to piece together his story. A retired K-9 officer passing through had recognized him. Shadow had served bravely until his handler, Sergeant Mark Redding, was killed in a botched drug bust. Labeled too aggressive from grief, the department had deemed him unfit for further duty. He was scheduled for euthanasia until he escaped the facility. Now he roamed Millfield's streets like a silent sentinel, accepting Eleanor's food but never her touch. Sophie knew nothing of that past when she and her father, Daniel Caldwell, moved into the Blue Craftsman on Magnolia Street 8 months ago. At 10, her world had already cracked wide open. Her mother's car had veered off Chapman Bridge the previous autumn, and nothing had been right since. Quiet and withdrawn, Sophie filled notebooks with sketches while her father worked double shifts at County Memorial Hospital. A former Army medic turned ER nurse, Daniel carried the same invisible weight in his shoulders that Shadow carried in his eyes, the weight of those who've seen too much, too young. Officer Ray Holland knew everyone in Millfield, not because he was nosy, but because 38 years on the beat will do that to a man. At 58, he'd started counting down the months to retirement. His leathery face was a map of the Georgia sun, and he'd recognized Shadow's bearing instantly, had left him alone out of a quiet respect. "Some wounds," he once told Eleanor, "don't need poking. These 4 lives, a wounded dog, a grieving child, an exhausted father, and a weary officer, orbited one another quietly under the lazy heat of a southern spring." Unaware that their paths were about to collide, on a Tuesday afternoon in May, when a 5th shadow entered their story, the school bell rang, echoing across Millfield Elementary's playground, and a flood of children rushed out into the warm air. Sophie emerged last, waiting for the crowd to thin before adjusting her pink backpack, the one her mother had given her for her birthday, and beginning her lonely walk home down Sycamore Avenue. Daniel had texted her at lunch, "Emergency at the hospital, double shift. Mrs. Lambert next door has the spare key if you need anything. Sorry, Sophie Bug, love you." She was used to messages like that. Since moving to Millfield, her father's absence had become as familiar as his old aftershave. The hospital was understaffed and Daniel couldn't say no. Sophie understood, but understanding didn't fill an empty house. From the shadows of an abandoned hardware store half a block away, Shadow watched the small figure in her blue dress and sneakers. His ears flicked forward at the sound of her humming, a soft, sad tune. For weeks he had observed her walking the same path. Sometimes she was with the tall man who smelled of antiseptic, but often she walked alone. Today, something felt different. A white van had circled the block 3 times before parking at the corner of Elm and Magnolia. The windows were tinted, but Shadow's instincts told him everything he needed to know. The man inside was watching the girl, and he smelled wrong. Adrenaline, sweat, nerves, a scent Shadow had learned to recognize during training. Wayne Harlan checked his watch. 3 weeks out of Rockdale Correctional, and he'd been careful, observing patterns, tracking schedules. The Caldwell girl was perfect. Father, always working. No close friends. New to town. No one would miss her for hours. He adjusted his baseball cap and glanced into the side mirror. Sophie had paused under the old oak tree halfway home. She set her backpack down, pulled out a sketchbook and pencil, and leaned against the trunk. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the branches, dancing over her page as she began to draw. She'd seen the German Shepherd before and had been working on a series of sketches. Something about the dog's eyes haunted her. Shadow tensed as the van door slid open. Just a crack. The man didn't get out, not yet, just cracked the opening wide enough to act quickly if needed. The dog's training surged back, threat analysis, strategic positioning. He crept from his hiding place, moving wide to approach Sophie from a direction the driver couldn't immediately see. Sophie was so focused on her drawing that she didn't notice Shadow until his silhouette crossed the page. She gasped, freezing mid-stroke. The German Shepherd stood 10 feet away, his eyes not on her, but fixed on the street beyond. "Hello," she whispered, a mix of awe and fear in her voice. She had admired this dog from afar, had drawn him many times, but never this close. Eleanor had warned her and the neighborhood kids. "He's been through something terrible, sweetheart. Best to let him be." Shadow's ears swiveled like radar. The van's engine had turned over. The vehicle had shifted slightly, positioning for a fast exit. In his mind, Sergeant Redding's voice returned. "Watch for stalkers. Trust your instincts." When Sophie slowly reached out her hand, palm up the way she'd been taught with frightened animals, Ranger made his decision in an instant. With a sudden lunge, he didn't go for the girl, but for the pink backpack beside her. His powerful jaws clamped down on the strap, yanking it away with a sharp tug. "Hey!" Sophie cried out, startled. "That's mine!" Ranger didn't flinch. He backed away, the backpack hanging from his teeth, eyes locked not on Sophie, but on the white van that had begun inching down the street toward them. A bark erupted from his chest, loud, deep, and commanding. Not the bark of fear, a warning. Then he circled, positioning himself between Sophie and the street, never taking his eyes off the approaching vehicle. Inside the van, Wayne Harlan cursed under his breath. The dog had changed the equation. It wasn't supposed to be complicated. Grab the girl, vanish before anyone noticed. Now this stray, with the focus of a soldier, was in the way. He eased his grip on the steering wheel, preparing to pass by casually. But something about the dog's posture made him hesitate. That stare. Director, unblinking. This wasn't how strays acted. It was almost like recognition. Sophie pushed herself to her feet, confused and flustered. "Give it back," she said, stepping forward. "Come on, drop it." She lunged toward the backpack, but Ranger danced away, keeping it just out of reach, backing slowly into a neighbor's open front yard. His movements were purposeful, strategic. He was pulling her out of the street, away from the curb, into view. Wayne's eyes flicked around. The street was empty. If he moved quickly, maybe... His hand drifted into his jacket pocket, fingers brushing the taser. One zap. That's all it would take. Dog or no dog. Sophie lunged again. This time, Ranger responded differently. He dropped the backpack for a split second. Then, as Sophie reached down, he snapped it up again, his teeth brushing her sleeve. The tug threw her off balance. She stumbled hard onto the grass, scraping her knee against a hidden rock buried in the lawn. The pain hit first, sharp, hot, then the fear. She screamed, "Help! Someone help!" She lay on the grass, tears mixing with dirt. A trembling hand pressed to her bleeding knee, staring in horror at the large German Shepherd still holding her backpack. To Sophie, the dog's intense posture looked like aggression. His protective stance looked like a threat. But Wayne? He saw something else entirely. This wasn't a random act. The dog was trained. His stomach twisted with a cold realization. That animal's a canine. Across the street, Martha Wilkins looked up from her porch, squinting through thick bifocals. She'd been watering her ferns, minding her own business, when she heard the cries. Her hand went to her chest. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. She set the watering can aside, stepping off her porch as fast as her arthritic knees would allow. The sight chilled her. Sophie on the ground, the big shepherd standing over her, pink backpack clenched tightly in its jaws. And then a siren. Distant, but growing louder. Officer Hank Donovan's cruiser appeared at the end of Magnolia Street, just his routine afternoon patrol. A coincidence that would later feel like divine intervention. Wayne panicked. No time left. He gripped the wheel tight and shifted the van into gear, pulling forward slowly, trying to appear casual as he rolled past. But his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror again and again, watching the scene fade behind him. He'd come back. He knew the girl's pattern now, and the dog wouldn't always be there. Ranger watched the van disappear down the street, but didn't relax. His legs remained tense, the backpack still clenched in his mouth, just like he'd been trained to do when signaling danger. When Officer Donovan's cruiser slowed beside the yard, the dog's tail gave a single, tentative wag. It was the first sign of emotion anyone in Millfield had ever seen from him. Donovan stepped out of the vehicle with the calm precision of a man who'd dealt with too many bad surprises. His hand rested gently on his holster, not drawing, but ready. He took in the scene, a crying child, a rigid dog, and Martha Wilkins hurrying as fast as her 73-year-old legs would carry her. What he didn't see, yet, was the white van turning the corner down Sycamore, or the man inside already making plans to return. What none of them saw was how this moment would change everything. "What's going on here?" Donovan called out, voice rough with the grit of southern humidity and too many cigarettes. Quit 15 years ago, but the rasp had lingered. Sophie pushed herself upright, wiping tears with the back of her hand. Dirt streaked her face. Her knee bled freely. "That dog! He took my backpack!" she sobbed, pointing at Ranger, who stood motionless, alert. The pack still hung from his jaws. Donovan crouched near her, one eye on the dog. "You hurt bad, sweetie?" he asked, voice gentler now. Sophie nodded weakly. "He pushed me down." She wasn't sure that was entirely true. It had all happened too fast, but she needed to say something. Her lip trembled. Martha finally reached them, breathless but determined. "Officer Donovan," she said with a nod, then turned to Sophie. "Child, are you all right? I saw it happen from my porch." Ranger hadn't moved. His ears twitched. His eyes flicked back to the corner where the van had vanished, then returned to the officer. Drool now darkened the pink fabric in his mouth. Donovan stood slowly, his knees cracking in protest. "Old injury, linebacker, Millbrook High, class of '82. He glanced at Martha. "You know anything about why this dog would suddenly start bothering kids?" She shook her head, her silver bob catching the fading light. "That ain't like him at all. He's been around here 3 years and he's never so much as barked at a kid. Keeps to himself." Donovan nodded, stepping forward cautiously, voice calm and measured. "Easy now, fella. Let's drop the backpack, huh?" Ranger's ears pricked forward. He didn't understand the words, but the tone, the command structure that he recognized. A flicker passed through his eyes, something like memory, but he didn't drop it. Instead, he looked toward the hedge across the street, deliberately. Then back to Donovan. The officer paused. Decades on the job had taught him to read a scene others might miss. He followed the dog's gaze, frowning at the thick line of bushes along the Petersons' property. Nothing moved, but the tension in the dog said something had. "That's Sophie Caldwell," Martha said softly. "Michael Caldwell's girl. They moved here after the accident. Her mama. That was the Chapman Bridge crash last year." Donovan's expression shifted. He remembered. Michael. The ER nurse from County Memorial, always showing up to help before EMTS arrived. A good man, a quiet one, wounded. Sophie had stopped crying. Her hiccups slowed. She looked between the adults, confused. "I was just drawing," she mumbled, pointing at the sketchbook that had landed a few feet away. Donovan stepped over, picked it up, and turned it to the open page. His eyebrows rose. A finely shaded sketch stared back at him. A German shepherd, intense eyes, familiar posture. "You've got real talent, Miss Caldwell," he said, handing it back. Ranger suddenly stiffened again. A low growl rumbled from his chest, his eyes fixed on something beyond them, toward the hedge. Donovan turned. The leaves shifted, just slightly, no wind. "Martha," he said, keeping his voice casual, "why don't you take Sophie up to your porch for a moment? Maybe get her a Band-Aid for that knee." But his hand drifted near his holster again. The routine had just become something else entirely. Martha might have been old, but she hadn't survived 7 decades in a small town without learning how to read between the lines. "Come along, honey," she said gently, extending a gnarled hand to Lily. "I've got cookies in the kitchen, and a first aid kit that's overdue for use." Lily hesitated, her eyes flicking to the backpack still clutched in the German shepherd's jaws. "But my homework—" "We'll sort that out in a jiffy," Officer Donovan said, giving her a reassuring nod. "Go on now, Lily. You're safe with Mrs. Wilkins." As Martha led the girl toward her house, Donovan casually unsnapped the cover on his holster. He pressed the button on the shoulder mic clipped to his uniform, lowering his voice. "Dispatch, this is Donovan. Run a check on any white vans reported in the area, particularly those tied to persons of interest. I'm at the corner of Magnolia and Elm." The radio crackled. "Copy that, Hank. Stand by." The dog hadn't moved. His eyes remained locked on the hedge across the street. Donovan's gaze followed his, studying the shepherd more closely now, details he'd missed before. A long scar traced along the dog's left flank. His posture wasn't feral or timid. It was composed, intentional, professional. Then Donovan saw it, the faded remnant of a tactical harness, mostly hidden beneath matted fur and time. "You're not just some runaway, are you, boy?" he murmured. A memory surfaced, one from years ago, a departmental bulletin about a military K-9 unit whose handler had been killed in the line of duty. The dog had vanished. The timeline would match. The radio buzzed again. "Hank, we've got a hit. White 2015 Ford Transit, spotted near Rockdale 2 days ago, registered to Wayne Harmon, just released on parole. Did 8 years for attempted abduction of a minor." A chill slid down Donovan's spine. "Any recent sightings?" "Missed his parole check-in yesterday. Consider him armed and dangerous." It all snapped together with sickening clarity. Donovan had seen the pattern before. A freshly released predator, a vulnerable child, a quiet street with few witnesses, and a dog that refused to let her pass that hedge. Ranger, still as a statue, suddenly dropped the backpack and let out a sharp, commanding bark, eyes fixed on the shrubbery. That was the moment Donovan understood what the dog had been doing all along, creating a distraction, keeping the girl away from danger, shielding her from whoever had been lurking, waiting in silence. "Son of a—" Donovan muttered, drawing his weapon. "Police officer," he called out, voice sharp and firm. "Come out with your hands where I can see them." Silence. Then the hedge rustled again, more deliberately this time. Ranger's growl deepened, a low rumble vibrating in his chest like a warning bell. Across the street, on Martha's porch, Lily watched wide-eyed as Donovan pointed his gun at the bushes. Martha wrapped an arm around the girl's trembling shoulders. Her other hand gripped a cordless phone. "What's happening?" Lily whispered. "Hush now, child," Martha said gently, even as her own heart raced. She'd already dialed Michael Spencer's number at the hospital, leaving an urgent message with the nurse's station. Donovan stepped closer, weapon steady. "Last warning, come out now." Suddenly a figure bolted from the far side of the hedge, darting for the corner. Donovan caught a glimpse. Baseball cap, dark jacket, tall frame. The man disappeared behind the Petersons' garage. "Dispatch, suspect fleeing on foot," Donovan shouted into his radio. "Eastbound toward Oakwood Drive." He took off after the man. At 58, Donovan wasn't as fast as he used to be, but fear, instinct, and training carried him forward. Ranger was already ahead of him, a blur of tan and black fur slicing through the air, running with the controlled power of a dog who hadn't forgotten his purpose. As he sprinted, a voice echoed in Ranger's mind. Sergeant Cooper's voice from the training fields. Channel the pursuit, focus the energy. His paws barely touched the ground as he tracked the suspect. Every stride was a testament to years of discipline and something deeper, something more primal. Wayne Harmon glanced back and saw the shepherd gaining. Panic flared. He cut between 2 houses, leapt over a chain-link fence, then another, but Ranger mirrored every move, gaining with every bound. Donovan had lost visual contact, but he could hear it. The chaos, barking, frightened shouts, the clang of a garbage can toppling. "Suspect moving through backyards toward Creek Street," he panted into the radio. "Request backup. Also need units at Mrs. Wilkins's home for containment." On Martha's porch, the older woman held Lily close. She could hear the growing wail of sirens. Police cruisers converged on the neighborhood. "Your daddy'll be here soon," Martha whispered to the trembling girl. "Everything's going to be all right." Lily stared out into the street. Her voice was small but certain. "The dog. He knew, didn't he? He wasn't trying to hurt me." Martha nodded slowly, her own pieces falling into place. "I believe you're right, child. That dog was protecting you all along." 3 blocks away, the chase ended. Wayne Harmon came to a dead stop at the edge of Creek Street. The old footbridge had collapsed months ago. He was cornered against the muddy bank with nowhere to run. Ranger stood between him and escape. Hackles raised, teeth bared. It was a clear warning. Move, and it'll be the last thing you do. When Donovan finally arrived, lungs burning, he found the scene already resolved. Harmon stood frozen in place. Predator turned prey. "Wayne Harmon!" Donovan barked, weapon drawn. "You're under arrest!" Backup officers surged in behind him, cuffing Harmon and hauling him to his feet. Donovan's eyes fell on Ranger. The German shepherd stood perfectly still, mission complete, watching silently as justice caught up with the man he'd hunted. For the first time in 3 years, Ranger allowed a human to approach. Donovan knelt, cautiously extending a hand, palm up. "Good boy," he murmured. "Damn good boy." Detective Donovan exchanged a tense glance with Chief Billings, then nodded toward the window of the interview room. "That man in there? That's Wayne Harmon," he said quietly. He was waiting for Lily on her walk home from school today. Michael's face drained of color. Instinctively, he pulled Lily closer. The girl looked up, puzzled by the grown-up's sudden shift in energy. "Wayne," Michael murmured. The name dredged up from a place he'd tried to forget. "Catherine's Wayne, from the hospital." Billings raised an eyebrow. "You knew him?" Michael's throat worked as he swallowed. "He worked with my wife, years ago before we moved out of the county. They dated, briefly, before she and I met." He lowered his voice, just enough so Lily couldn't hear. "He didn't take the breakup well. Started showing up at our place, calling at all hours. Catherine eventually had to file a restraining order." The puzzle pieces were falling into place, except the picture they formed was darker than any of them had imagined. Donovan felt that familiar chill, the one that crept in when the truth was uglier than the surface ever let on. "Mr. Spencer," Donovan said carefully, "we need to talk about your wife's accident." Michael's expression turned to stone. "What about it?" he asked. "The investigation already concluded she lost control going into the curve. The guardrail gave way." His voice faltered. "They said it was instantaneous." "Sir," Billings interjected gently, "Harmon's parole officer reported that he'd been asking questions about your wife's accident, and we found something in his van, something that suggests he may have been at Chapman Bridge that night." The air in the room thickened like fog. Lily looked up at her father. "Daddy, what's wrong?" Michael knelt to her level, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Nothing, Lilybug. Just grown-up talk. Why don't you go with Mrs. Wilkins for a bit while I speak with the officers?" Martha took Lily's hand and whispered something about chocolate from the vending machine as they walked off. Once the door shut behind them, Michael's voice broke. "Are you saying Wayne had something to do with Catherine's death?" "We don't know yet," Billings admitted. "But the coincidences are piling up. He's released, immediately violates parole, comes straight to Millbrook, and targets your daughter." He paused. "There's something bigger here." Michael ran a hand through his hair. It trembled as it passed over his scalp. "Oh, God," he whispered. "What if?" He couldn't bring himself to finish the thought. Donovan gently brought the conversation back. "What matters now is that Harmon didn't succeed today. And that's because of the dog." Michael turned toward the window. Ranger sat just outside, his sharp gaze trained on the station entrance. "Martha said he grabbed Lily's backpack," Michael said, still trying to piece it all together. "I don't understand." "Near as we can tell," Donovan replied, "he created a distraction. Kept Lily in plain sight, out in the open, away from the bushes where Harmon was hiding. When I arrived, Ranger had placed himself between Lily and the spot Harmon had staked out." "That's incredible," Michael said. "But how would a stray dog know to do that?" Donovan shook his head. "He's not just any stray. I've been making calls since we brought Harmon in. That dog out there, that's Ranger, formerly Canine Officer Ranger of the Atlanta Police Department, specialized in personal protection and kidnapping intervention. Michael stared at him, stunned. What's he doing in Millbrook? His handler was killed in the line of duty 3 years ago, Donovan explained. Ranger was deemed too traumatized to reassign. They scheduled him for euthanasia, but he escaped. He sighed. Been on his own ever since, as far as anyone knows. Through the glass they watched as Ranger moved a step closer to the door, ears perked, eyes alert, as if he understood every word. Despite the gravity of the moment, Michael felt a surge of profound gratitude. He needs a vet, Michael said abruptly. If he's been on the streets for 3 years, Martha's been feeding him, Donovan reassured. But yeah, you're right. He should get proper care. Chief Billings cleared his throat. Right now, our focus is here. Spencer, we'd like your permission to reopen the investigation into your wife's accident. We also want to assign an officer to your house until we know Harmon acted alone. Michael nodded, still reeling. Yes, whatever you need. In the conference room, Lily sat beside Martha, a half-eaten chocolate bar forgotten in her hand. Her gaze never left Ranger through the window. Mrs. Wilkins? She asked suddenly. Do you think Ranger knew that man was bad? Martha considered. I reckon he did, sweetheart. Dogs have a way of sensing what people sometimes forget. Dad says Mum always knew who was good and who wasn't, Lily said quietly. He said that was her superpower. Martha smiled gently. Smart woman, your mama. Lily's next words came softer still. Do you think Ranger needs a home? He looks lonely out there. Before Martha could answer, Officer Reynolds appeared. Lily, your dad's asking for you. We're going to take you both home now. As they exited the station, Lily tugged at her father's hand. Dad, can we help Ranger? He saved me. Michael looked down at his daughter, then out through the glass doors, where the German shepherd waited patiently. Something in him shifted, a softening, a decision. Yes, he said simply. Yes, we can. Outside, Donovan approached Ranger with slow, measured steps, speaking in a low, calming tone. The dog watched him with intelligent eyes, but didn't move. How do we handle this? Michael asked, stopping beside the station doors. If he's been avoiding people for years? Donovan stepped back. Maybe he'll respond to Lily. He protected her after all. Michael hesitated, the weight of a parent's worry battling against gratitude. Finally, he nodded. Lily, stay right next to me, okay? Together they stepped outside. Ranger's eyes locked onto them, his body alert but not aggressive. Hi, Ranger, Lily said softly. Thank you for helping me. To everyone's surprise, Ranger took a step forward, then another. Slowly, cautiously, he stopped a few feet away, fixing his gaze on Michael, almost as if asking for permission. Michael's voice cracked with emotion. It's okay. You're welcome here. At those words, Ranger moved again, this time settling into a formal sit directly in front of Lily, the unmistakable posture of a trained canine, reporting for duty. Lily extended her hand, palm up. After a heartbeat, Ranger leaned in and gently touched her fingers with his nose. A collective breath released among the officers watching. Martha wiped at the corner of her eye. Would you look at that? She whispered. Some things are just meant to be. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the police station lot, Michael led Lily to the truck. Ranger followed, calm, steady, never taking his eyes off the girl. We'll have an officer parked outside your house tonight, Donovan said. First thing tomorrow, we'll need to talk more about Harmon and about Catherine. Michael nodded solemnly. I'll drop Lily at school and come straight to the station. Martha touched his arm. Bring her to me instead. School can wait a day or two after what she's been through. Michael offered her a weary but sincere smile. Thank you, Martha, for everything today. As he opened the truck door, Ranger hesitated, standing beside the vehicle, glancing toward the street as if torn between the road and something deeper. Come on, boy, Michael said gently. Time to go home. Ranger paused for only a moment, then leapt gracefully into the back seat, settling beside Lily. The girl beamed. Across town, in the sterile quiet of the police station's interview room, Wayne Harmon finally broke his silence. I want a lawyer, he said, when Chief Billings entered. Oh, you'll get one, Billings replied, dropping a heavy evidence bag on the table. But first, I'd like you to explain why we found brake fluid and cutting tools in your van, the kind used to tamper with a vehicle. His voice dropped. A vehicle like Catherine Spencer's. Harmon's face remained impassive, but his eyes darted toward the bag with nervous flickers. "We're reopening the investigation into her death," Billings said. "And while we're at it, we're looking into other accidents near every correctional facility you were transferred to over the years." For the first time, uncertainty cracked Harmon's mask. Billings leaned in, his voice razor-sharp. "That dog who ruined your plans today? Turns out he has a hell of a record for sniffing out the truth." He smiled coldly. "And now, he's finally found his voice." Back on Magnolia Street, Michael's truck eased into the driveway of the blue Craftsman house. Lily had fallen asleep during the short ride home, the weight of the day finally overtaking her. In the back seat, Ranger remained upright, eyes scanning the street with the practiced vigilance of a soldier returning from war. Michael caught the dog's gaze in the rearview mirror and felt a jolt of connection, unexpected yet undeniable. Two guardians, each bearing their own invisible scars, united now by a silent oath: protect the girl sleeping between them. "I don't know if you understand me," Michael said quietly, not turning around. "But you saved my daughter today. You've got a home here for as long as you want it." Ranger's ears perked at the sound of his voice. He didn't break eye contact. No bark, no wag, just understanding. The pact had already been made, wordlessly sealed in the parking lot of the police station. Two fractured souls drawn together by the desperate need to shield the last pure thing in their lives. Michael carried Lily inside, her head resting on his shoulder, while Ranger padded silently up the steps. At the threshold, the dog paused. He looked back once at the street he'd patrolled alone for nearly 3 years. Porch lights flickered on as twilight settled over Millbrook. Martha's wind chimes whispered in the breeze. Officer Parker's cruiser sat tucked across the street, a quiet promise of safety. Then Ranger crossed the threshold. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Dawn arrived with the gentle colors of a southern spring morning. But inside the Spencer home, peace was an illusion. Michael stood at the kitchen counter, phone pressed to his ear. Voice low so as not to wake Lily, Ranger sat nearby in the doorway, still alert, despite having spent the night cycling between Lily's room and patrols around the perimeter. "Yes, Chief, I understand," Michael muttered, rubbing his eyes with his free hand. The coffee in his mug was cold, forgotten during the long call. 2 o'clock at the station, I'll be there." As he ended the call and turned, Ranger was already watching him, those intelligent amber eyes fixed on his every move. Michael hesitated, then extended his hand, palm up. Ranger stepped forward, allowing a brief touch to his head before pulling back to his usual distance. "They found something?" Michael said aloud, his voice hushed like a confession. "In Wayne's storage unit. Photos of Catherine from before the accident, of me and Lily too." His throat tightened. "Chief thinks it wasn't an accident. He thinks Wayne's been planning something for years." Ranger's ears twitched. A low rumble rose in his chest. Not a growl, but a sound of agreement, recognition, danger. The creak of small feet on the stairs broke the moment. Lily appeared in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, eyes immediately seeking out her protector. "You're still here," she whispered, as if afraid he might vanish like a dream. Ranger straightened and turned to her, posture softening. Though he didn't wag his tail, there was a gentleness in his gaze, meant only for her. Michael offered a strained smile. "Of course he's still here. Ranger's going to stay with us for a while." He checked the clock. "Martha's coming over to stay with you today. I have to go to the station." Lily's face fell. "Can't I come?" "I don't want to stay here." "It's just grown-up stuff, Lily-pad," Michael said, trying to sound reassuring. But even he could hear the hollowness in his words. "Officer Parker's outside, and Ranger will be with you." Almost on cue, Ranger moved beside Lily, sitting upright at her side. Message received. He was on duty. Martha arrived 30 minutes later with a basket of fresh biscuits and a bag full of dog supplies. "Stopped by the pet store on my way," she said, setting everything on the counter. "Figured our hero might need some essentials." Michael thanked her with a look that said more than words. Before leaving, he knelt beside Lily. "I won't be long, okay?" Lily nodded solemnly, her hand resting gently on Ranger's back. The dog had stayed glued to her side since she'd come downstairs. Martha walked Michael to the door. "Go on now. We'll be just fine here." She glanced back at Lily and the German shepherd. That dog isn't letting her out of his sight. Michael's drive to the station was interrupted by a call from the hospital. 3 trauma cases from a highway accident were en route, and they were short-staffed. He hesitated, torn between his duty as a nurse and the urgent need for answers. "I'll come in at 5, he told Chief Billings. "This can wait a few hours, right?" "It can. And those folks need you more right now." At the Spencer home, the day unfolded with deceptive normalcy. Martha was teaching Lily how to make her famous peach cobbler. Ranger stood watch by the back door, his presence steady and calming. "You know," Martha said, carefully cutting the butter. "My Harold always said the secret's in how you slice it." The phone rang. Martha wiped her hands and answered. "Spencer residence." Her expression changed immediately. Her brow furrowed. "There's no one here by that name," she said sharply. Then, after a pause, she hung up. "Wrong number?" Lily asked, her hands dusted in flour. "Must be," Martha said lightly. But her eyes flicked to Ranger across the room. The dog had risen. His posture was tense. Something had shifted in the house's atmosphere. Ranger padded to the window, scanning the backyard with quiet intensity. At County Memorial, Michael moved like a machine. His body performed the tasks, sutures, compressions, orders barked to the trauma team, but his mind was elsewhere. As he finished scrubbing out of a messy case, his phone buzzed. A text from Officer Parker. "Call dispatch ASAP." Cold dread slithered down his spine. He dialed with trembling fingers. "Michael, it's Chief Billings," came the voice on the line. "Wayne Harmon escaped custody during transport. Overpowered a deputy at a rest stop. That was 90 minutes ago." The world lurched. "I have to get home," Michael said, already moving. "Parker's still at your house," the chief assured him. "We've dispatched backup. Just get home safe. Don't speed. Don't take chances. The last thing we need is you in an accident, too." The words hit like a sucker punch. Michael ended the call and bolted. Back at the house, Martha had moved Lily into the central living room, away from windows. They played board games under the soft hum of unease. Ranger moved from window to window, his patrol now urgent. He returned to Lily periodically, touching his nose to her arm as if grounding himself. "Something's wrong," Lily said plainly, watching Ranger's movements. "Is it that man from yesterday?" Martha paused. "Yes," she admitted, "but Officer Parker is outside, and your daddy's on his way home." Suddenly, Ranger froze. His ears shot forward, body tensed like a spring. A low growl vibrated from his chest, deeper than before. Immediate. "Lily, come with me," Martha said, taking the girl's hand and leading her to the hall closet, a small space with no windows and a solid door. "We're going to play a quiet game." Glass shattered in the kitchen. Ranger's bark erupted sharp and explosive. Martha shoved Lily inside the closet, pressing her phone into the child's trembling hands. "Call 911, tell them someone's breaking into your house, but Mrs. Wilkins. I'll be right out here with Ranger. Stay inside until your daddy or a police officer comes." She shut the door firmly. Martha turned, pulse hammering. Ranger stood like a statue, body low and coiled between the hallway and the sound of the intrusion. Footsteps trying to be quiet, betrayed by the creaking floorboards. "You'd best leave while you can," Martha called, her voice louder than she felt. "The police are on their way." Wayne Harmon stepped into view. He held a kitchen knife. His face was scratched and filthy, his prison clothes traded for a mismatched set of civilian rags. His eyes scanned the hallway, wild, desperate. "Where is she?" he demanded. "Where's Lily?" Ranger growled, unmoving, waiting for the line to be crossed. "You need to leave, Wayne," Martha said, standing her ground. "There's nothing for you here." Wayne's eyes narrowed. They landed on the closet door. "She's in there. Move, old woman, like you didn't want to hurt Catherine," Martha snapped. "We know what you did to her, to Lily's mother." A shadow passed over Wayne's face. "Catherine was mine. She promised she'd come back. Then she had that kid, and everything changed." Sirens howled outside. Panic loomed across his face. "Move!" he roared, lunging. Ranger struck, a blur of muscle and fury. His jaws locked around Wayne's arm, the one holding the knife, and held. He didn't go for the throat. He didn't need to. Wayne howled in agony as the knife clattered to the linoleum. Ranger lunged with precision, forcing the man backward into the kitchen. Martha, heart hammering in her chest, darted forward. Her hands trembled violently as she grabbed the blade, flinging it across the floor away from the fray. The front door exploded open. Officer Parker entered first, weapon drawn, eyes scanning the chaos. Michael was on his heels, having arrived with the backup units in a screech stench of sirens and gravel. "Lily!" Michael's voice cracked with fear. "She's in the closet!" Martha gasped, pointing with a shaking finger. Michael bolted across the living room, yanking open the closet door. Inside, Lily was curled into a ball, phone clutched tightly to her chest, her cheeks streaked with tears. He dropped to his knees and swept her into his arms, cradling her so tightly she gave a startled squeak. In the kitchen, Ranger had Wayne pinned flat to the floor. The man's fight was fading fast beneath the weight and power of a trained canine who maintained his grip with flawless control, enough pressure to restrain, none to maim. "Call off your dog," Wayne rasped as Officer Parker advanced, cuffs in hand. But it wasn't Parker who answered. Michael appeared in the kitchen doorway, Lily clinging to his chest. His face was a war zone of fury, relief, and something deeper, an unspoken reckoning. This was the man who had stalked his daughter, who had likely taken Catherine's life, who might have destroyed what little he had left. "Ranger," Michael said, voice low but clear. "Release command." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of command, of connection. Ranger obeyed instantly. He loosened his hold and retreated to Michael's side, every muscle alert, yet calm. His job was done. Parker moved in, cuffing Wayne without incident. More officers spilled into the house. Chief Billings arrived a moment later, his sharp eyes taking in the scene. "Everyone all right?" he asked, his gravelly voice betraying concern beneath its edge. Michael nodded, still holding Lily close. Thanks to Ranger and Martha. They turned to see Martha seated at the kitchen table, a young officer gently draping a shock blanket over her frail shoulders. "That dog," she said hoarsely, her voice cracking with emotion, "is worth his weight in gold." Outside, the quiet neighborhood had erupted into a crowd. Neighbors stood clustered on lawns, eyes wide, whispers passing between them as Wayne Harmon was led out in cuffs. His arm was hastily bandaged, his head hung low, not from pain, but from shame. Inside, Michael and Lily sat on the living room sofa, the girl curled into his side, finally starting to register the terror she had survived. "He wanted to hurt me," she whispered. "Just like he hurt Mom." Michael closed his eyes, swallowing hard. That truth, spoken aloud, was a wound all its own. "But he didn't," he whispered back. "Because Ranger was here. Because Mrs. Wilkins was brave. Because you were brave." Ranger lay at their feet, body still and eyes watchful. When Lily slid from the couch and wrapped her arms around his thick neck, he accepted the embrace in stoic silence, only the slightest lean of his body revealing that he, too, needed comfort. "He's a hero," Lily said, her voice muffled in his fur. From her chair, Martha watched the moment unfold, eyes damp with understanding. "Heroes come in all shapes," she said softly. "Sometimes they're just waiting for someone to give them a reason to remember who they are." The veterinary clinic on Poplar Street had seen plenty of emergencies, but never a crowd like this. Michael sat stiffly in the waiting room, Lily curled into his side, her wide eyes fixed on the closed exam room door. Across from them, Martha sat cradling a styrofoam cup of lukewarm coffee, her hands barely steady. Officer Donovan stood leaning against the wall, uniform rumpled from nearly 18 hours on duty. Even Chief Billings had stopped by earlier before heading off to supervise Wayne's booking. "Daddy, is he going to be okay?" Lily asked for the third time, her voice thin and wobbly. Michael gently squeezed her shoulder, summoning a reassuring tone he didn't fully feel. "Dr. Roberts is the best vet for 3 counties. She's got him." But the truth was harder. After the chaos had settled, Michael noticed Ranger favoring his right side. A stab wound. Not immediately fatal, but deep enough to draw serious concern. "He still took that guy down like clockwork," Donovan said with a shake of his head. "Precision, restraint, that's not just instinct. That's training." Martha's gaze drifted. "Reminded me of those old war reels Harold used to watch. The discipline in that animal." The exam door finally opened. Dr. Elaine Roberts stepped out, peeling off her surgical gloves. She looked tired, blood on her sleeves, silver strands escaping her bun, eyes soft behind wire-rimmed glasses. "He's stable," she said at once, reading the room. Everyone exhaled. "The knife missed vital organs, but there was a lot of blood loss. He's on antibiotics and fluids." Lily slumped with relief. "When can he come home? I'd like to keep him overnight for observation." She hesitated. "And there's something else." Michael tensed. "What is it?" "I scanned him for a microchip during surgery. He has one. I contacted the registry." The air in the waiting room shifted. Hope mingled with dread. Ranger was registered to the Atlanta Police Department. Handler, Sergeant James Cooper. Michael's heart sank.
She continued gently. Sergeant Cooper died in the line of duty 3 years ago. Ranger was supposed to be retired, but he escaped the facility before the paperwork was processed. They're not going to take him, are they? Lily's voice rose, panic bleeding in. Before Michael could speak, Donovan stepped forward. I've been on the phone with Atlanta PD all afternoon. After hearing what Ranger did today, they've agreed to formally release him from service. They're drafting transfer paperwork. He looked at Michael. If you want him, the words lingered. But the answer was already written in the way Lily clutched her father's hand, in the way Ranger had risked his life twice. Michael didn't speak. Instead, he asked, "Can we see him?" Dr. Roberts nodded briefly. He sedated but responsive, 2 at a time. Inside the exam room, Ranger lay on a metal table, heavily bandaged, and 4 threaded through his leg. His ears flicked at their entrance, eyes half-lidded but aware. Lily approached slowly. "You saved me," she whispered, placing a small hand on his head. "Thank you." Ranger's tail gave the faintest thump. Michael stood beside her, emotion tight in his throat. This dog hadn't just protected his daughter. He carried a pain Michael recognized. Loss, duty, solitude. "You've been alone too long, haven't you, boy?" he murmured, gently brushing his hand over Ranger's uninjured shoulder. Dr. Roberts checked the 4 lines, then added softly, "There's one more thing. The department said Ranger was awarded the Medal of Valor." Michael turned to her, stunned. He dragged Sergeant Cooper to cover while under fire, then returned to subdue the shooter, she said. "He wasn't just a service dog. He was a soldier." A gravelly voice came from the doorway. "He saved my life." They turned. A man in a wheelchair rolled into the room. Civilian clothes, military haircut, a blanket covering his legs, and a chocolate lab by his side. The kind of man whose bearing spoke of discipline and years in service. "Sam Turner," he said. "I worked with Jim Cooper the night he died." Dr. Roberts blinked. "I didn't know Atlanta had notified." "They didn't," Sam interrupted gently. "I've been looking for Ranger ever since he went missing. They told me he'd been put down. I never believed it." Michael studied him. "There was a story here. You knew him well?" Sam rolled closer to the table. Ranger stirred, tail wagging slightly with recognition. "I trained with Jim and Ranger," Sam said, eyes fixed on the shepherd, "before I lost my legs, before he lost everything." Ranger's ears twitched. His tail thumped louder this time. And Michael knew with certainty that this wasn't the end of Ranger's story. It was the beginning. Turner's voice was quiet, raw with memory. "The shooter got me first," he said, motioning to his legs. "I went down hard. Couldn't move. I called for backup. Jim and Ranger responded." He paused, the air thick with unspoken weight. "Ranger took out the first suspect before we realized there was a second shooter. Jim was hit. Ranger dragged him cover, then went back out." His voice faltered. "Took down the second shooter on his own. By then, it was too late for Jim." He looked over at the German shepherd, lying sedated on the exam table. "If it weren't for Ranger, I wouldn't be here either." The room grew still, filled only by the steady beep of monitors and the soft whoosh of medical equipment. Lily glanced up at Turner, then back at the dog who'd risked everything. Her fingers rested gently on Ranger's head, as if trying to bridge the gap between child and warrior. Michael's voice broke the silence. Why didn't they let another officer work with him after all that? Turner's face darkened. Politics. Budget cuts. A new K-9 commander who believed trauma-bonded dogs couldn't be trusted again. Said he showed signs of aggression during reassessment. They scheduled him for euthanasia. Lily gasped softly, her hand tensing. "The night before his scheduled termination," Turner continued, a wry smile barely touching his lips, "someone left his kennel unlocked. He disappeared. Some of us think it wasn't an accident. No one investigated too hard." From the doorway, Martha Wilkins stood quietly, one hand pressed to her chest. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "That poor animal's been carrying all that around all alone for 3 years." Turner nodded solemnly. "When Atlanta PD called to say he'd stopped another tragedy, I had to see it myself." He turned to Michael, meeting his eyes directly. "I don't know your plans, but that dog deserves a home where he's seen, where his service means something." Michael felt Lily's hopeful gaze on him, bright with silent pleading. He looked at Ranger, who despite sedation, watched him with unwavering, alert eyes. It didn't feel like a decision. It felt like truth finally surfacing. "He has a home," Michael said quietly, "with us." Lily's face lit with joy so pure it stung. "Forever?" she whispered. "Forever," Michael confirmed. Turner's nod held quiet satisfaction. "I'll take care of the paperwork. Training records, medical history, everything." Dr. Roberts cleared her throat gently, her professional tone returning. "As touching as this is, my patient needs rest. You can continue this conversation in the waiting room. As they left, Lily leaned down to Ranger's ear. Get better soon, she whispered. We're going home together. And maybe it was coincidence or maybe something deeper. But Ranger's tail gave a single thump against the table. A quiet promise. 3 days later, Michael sat stiffly in Chief Billings' office, sunlight slanting across worn carpet and dust-flecked air. Beside him sat District Attorney Eleanor Prescott, her navy suit sharp, her pearl necklace a quiet contrast to the humble precinct walls. We've concluded a preliminary investigation, Billings said, flipping open a thick folder. We wanted you to hear from us before the media does. Michael nodded, bracing. Since Wayne Harmon's arrest, time had passed strangely, part relief, part dread. He hadn't been able to stop thinking about Catherine, about the brake lines, about the years of wondering if it really had just been a tragic accident. I want the truth, he said firmly. Prescott adjusted her glasses. We found detailed journals in Harmon's storage unit. They go back 12 years. Michael stiffened. 12 years? That's before I even met Catherine. Billings nodded grimly. They dated briefly while working at County Memorial. When she ended things, he didn't take it well. Followed her. Took pictures. Hundreds. Prescott continued gently. Photos of her at work. Out shopping. Later at your wedding, your home. Lily as a baby. Michael's stomach turned. The idea of Harmon stalking their family. Watching, waiting, unseen. And the accident? He asked, barely able to say the words. Billings hesitated, then answered. We found tools that matched the damage on her brake lines. And in his journals, he described tracking her schedule. He waited until she'd be driving alone near Chapman Bridge. The words hit Michael like a punch to the chest. All those years of doubt now hardened into horrifying certainty. He confessed this morning, Prescott said softly. In exchange for removing the death penalty, he gave a full statement about Catherine and about Lily. Michael's head snapped up. What about Lily? Prescott hesitated. He believed that with Catherine gone, he could eventually be part of your lives. When you moved away, he twisted it into thinking you were keeping Lily from him. He's delusional, Michael muttered, rage rising. Worse than delusional, Billings said. He saw Lily as theirs. He planned to take her to a remote cabin in the North Georgia mountains. Make her part of his family. Michael's hands clenched. The thought of what might have happened if Ranger hadn't intervened left him nauseous. There's more, Prescott added, her voice heavier now. During interrogation, Harmon hinted at other incidents. We've contacted authorities in 3 counties. They're reopening missing child cases from places he lived or worked. The air left the room. Michael could barely process it all. This man, this predator, had been hiding in plain sight, waiting, watching. We'll need Lily to testify, Prescott said carefully. We'll make it as gentle as possible. Her account of his attempt to approach her and Ranger's intervention is critical. Michael nodded, hollowed out. She'd been having nightmares. Wakes up crying for her mom. For Ranger, too. How is he? Billings asked gently. Recovering. Won't leave Lily's side. She reads to him. Yesterday, Atlanta PD sent his service medals. She placed them next to his bed. Prescott began gathering her files, but Billings stopped him. One more thing. He reached into a drawer and retrieved a small velvet box. We found this in Harmon's storage unit. We believe it belonged to Catherine. Michael opened it slowly and froze. Inside was a simple silver locket. Her grandmother's. She'd worn it the day she died. The funeral home said it had been lost in the crash. He took it, Billings confirmed, after tampering with the car. Michael shut the box, trembling. Thank you. Lily should have this. Outside the station, Michael sat in his truck, fingers curled around the jewelry box. The truth of Catherine's murder was a weight, but it was also a kind of relief. No longer lost in the unknown. Now he knew. He drove home slowly, and as he turned onto Magnolia Street, Martha Wilkins gave a wave from her porch, a reminder that they weren't alone. Inside, Lily knelt beside Ranger's new orthopedic bed, a gift from Dr. Roberts. The shepherd's side was still wrapped in bandages, but his eyes were alert, calm. Dad, Lily grinned. Ranger ate all his breakfast. That's great, Lily pad, Michael said, kneeling to check the wound. Healing well. One more scar on a body full of them. She held up a library book. We're learning about police dogs. Did you know Ranger knows German too? Michael smiled. Is that so? Mr. Turner said he'd teach us the commands when Ranger's better. Dad, Mr. Turner's not taking Ranger back, right? Michael met her eyes. No, sweetie. Ranger's part of our family now. Lily beamed. Good. Mom would have loved him. The words caught Michael by surprise. He swallowed hard. Yeah, I think you're right. She always had a soft spot for strays. Ranger lifted his head, nudging Lily's hand with his nose. He knows when I'm sad, she whispered. Like Mom used to. Michael blinked away sudden tears and reached into his pocket. I have something for you. Her eyes widened as he opened the jewelry box. Grandma's necklace, she gasped. Mom wore this all the time. She wanted you to have it someday, Michael said. fastening the locket around her neck. I think now is the right time. In the window, her reflection shimmered, so much like Catherine that it made him ache. Can we put a picture of Mom and Ranger inside? She asked. Of course. That afternoon, Detective Turner returned, wheeling himself up the new porch ramp. Beside him walked a chocolate lab named Scout. How's our patient? Turner asked. Restless without Lily, Michael said with a grin. Ranger, hearing the familiar voice, struggled upright. His tail wagged slowly, eyes fixed on Turner. Hello, old friend, Turner said softly. I see you found your new post. Lily watched the exchange with curiosity. Did you work with Ranger too? Sometimes, Turner replied. Jim Cooper was his main partner, but we understood each other. He reached into a bag and pulled out a weathered leather binder. Inside, photos of Ranger in training, receiving medals, helping in drug busts. He was a hero before he came to us, Lily whispered. Turner nodded. Heroes don't always get to rest, but sometimes they find home. Turner's voice softened. He was treated right once, but after Jim died, his expression clouded. They didn't know what to do with Ranger. Didn't see that grief can look like aggression. That he needed time, not a kennel and a label. Michael's eyes drifted to the binder again, but his mind was far from Paige. He thought of the nights after Catherine passed. The quiet rage, the detachment, the ache he tried to bury just to function for Lily's sake. I understand that, he said quietly, his voice steady. Turner looked up, their eyes meeting in a silent exchange of understanding. Shared pain, shared survival. There's something else, Turner continued, flipping to another page in the binder, something that might explain why Ranger took to Lily the way he did. He slid a photograph across the table. Michael leaned in. It showed a younger Sergeant Jim Cooper kneeling between a woman and a little girl, all three beaming at the camera. Ranger sat dutifully beside them, younger and brighter-eyed, his coat still glossy, unmarked by the battles yet to come. That's Jim's wife and daughter, Turner said. Sophie, she was 8 when this was taken. Same age Lily was when you arrived. Same hair color. Same laugh, too, if you ask me. Michael stared at the image, realization dawning his chest like a slow-burning light. Ranger wasn't just protecting Lily, he murmured. He saw someone he'd already lost, someone he'd sworn to protect. Turner nodded. Sometimes our wounds, they lead us where we need to be. Across the room, Ranger lifted his head from his bed. His eyes, once dulled by grief, now glimmered with quiet purpose. The weight of his past was still there, but no longer defined him. A broken dog, a grieving family, brought together not by chance, but by something deeper, something that looked a lot like fate. 1 year later, magnolia trees swayed in the summer breeze, their blossoms perfuming the air along the sidewalks of Millbrook. At number 23, a hand-painted sign swung gently beneath the mailbox. Home of Ranger, retired K-9 officer, inside the Blue Craftsman house. Michael Spencer adjusted his tie in the mirror, casting a glance at the stairs. Lily, 5-minute warning. Coming, her voice called down, followed by the soft thump-thump-thump of Ranger's tail against the hardwood. At 11, Lily had grown taller, her childish roundness giving way to early grace. She wore a yellow sundress, her grandmother's locket glinting at her throat, hair tied with matching ribbon. Beside her, Ranger padded proudly, his vest polished and decorated with his badges and service medals. The scar on his side, now a faint line beneath his coat, was a quiet reminder of the day everything changed. Michael smiled. You both look perfect. Ranger, now Lily's shadow, went everywhere with her. School, therapy, and now this. Is everyone coming? Lily asked, checking her small purse for the note cards she'd rewritten a dozen times. The whole town, I'd bet, Michael said as they stepped out. It's not every day Millbrook dedicates a park.
Nearby, Officer Donovan, now Lieutenant Donovan, helped guests to their seats, pride stiffening his otherwise uncomfortable stance. There they are, Billings announced as the Spencers arrived. Our guests of honor. Lily hesitated under the attention, nerves prickling her skin. Ranger leaned into her side, steady as always. She inhaled slowly, feeling his calm seep into her. You've got this, Michael whispered, squeezing her shoulder. Familiar faces turned toward them. Dr. Roberts from the veterinary clinic, Lily's classmates, teachers, and even D.A. Prescott from the county seat. Her formal demeanor softened for the occasion. Chief Billings cleared his throat. Friends and neighbors, we gather today not just to celebrate a new public space, but to honor courage, the kind that shows up in unexpected forms. He spoke of Millbrook's history of community safety and referenced a threat to our children that had been thwarted by vigilance and bravery, avoiding the name Wayne Harmon altogether. We owe thanks to many, he said, gesturing to Martha, including Mrs. Martha Wilkins, who placed herself in harm's way for young Lily Spencer. Martha flushed, dabbing her eyes. But 2 individuals stand out today, Billings said, turning to Lily and Ranger, which is why the town council voted unanimously to name this park in their honor. Lily and Ranger stepped forward. Ranger walked with poise, the months of healing evident in his steady stride. The lost, haunted dog of a year ago was gone. In his place stood a protector, proud and whole. Lily Spencer has a few words to share, Billings said, adjusting the microphone to her height. Lily looked out at the crowd, heart racing. Her fingers curled around her note cards, but then she felt Ranger's nudge. She didn't need them. "A year ago," she began, her voice clear and sure, "a dog stole my backpack." Laughter rippled gently through the audience. "I thought he was just a stray, causing trouble. I didn't know he was saving my life." She looked down at Ranger. He met her gaze, unmoving but full of presence. Ranger saw something I didn't. Someone waiting to hurt me. And he remembered his training, even after everything he'd been through. Michael watched her, pride swelling in his chest. "When my mum died, I thought I'd never feel safe again," Lily continued. "Dad and I were lost, but Ranger, he showed us that even when you've lost everything, you can still protect, still love, still hope." Martha wept openly, Turner's jaw clenched, eyes bright. "Ranger taught me that heroes don't always wear uniforms," Lily said. "Sometimes they walk on 4 legs, and sometimes, when you're broken, the right friend finds you." She placed her hand on Ranger's head. "That's why this park matters. It's a place where kids can play without fear, a place that reminds us all healing is possible." Chief Billings stepped beside her, visibly moved. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to unveil the official name of Millbrook's newest public space." Together, he and Lily pulled the blue cloth away. "Ranger's Watch Park, where every child is protected, dedicated to Canine Officer Ranger and all who stand guard over our children." Applause erupted. Lily knelt to embrace Ranger, whispering something in his ear that made his tail wag, a rare break in his stoic composure. Michael joined them, and for a moment, the 3 stood together before the monument. Flashbulbs popped, cheers rose. It wasn't an end, it was a beginning. Later that day, as the picnic unfolded and children explored the new playground, Michael sat beneath a young oak tree watching Ranger and Lily. Martha joined him, easing onto the bench with a small grunt. "You've done right by that girl," she said. "And that dog too." Michael smiled. "They've done right by me. I was drowning after Catherine. Moving here felt like running away, until a broken dog found us." "Some call that coincidence," Martha said, patting his arm. "I call it providence." Across the park, Ranger stood beside Lily as she showed off the plaque with her name etched in bronze. His eyes scanned the perimeter, old habits intact, always vigilant. "Catherine would be proud," Martha said softly. Michael nodded, emotion tugging at his chest. "She always said everything happens for a reason." I didn't believe that, not after she died. And now, he watched Ranger gently herd Lily away from the sidewalk and toward the heart of the park, his protection so seamless it looked like play. "Now," Michael whispered, "now I think maybe." She was right. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, Ranger led his family home. His steps were steady, confident, not just fulfilling duty, but walking in purpose. Once a ghost of a guardian, now reborn into the role he was always meant to play. Some stories begin in sorrow. This one ends in strength and a little girl's laughter echoing in a park built on second chances.